Right, my name is Bill Smith. I work as a volunteer for the East Essex Aviation Museum in Tower A over at Point Clear, St Osyth, and because I organised digs, I got involved with this dig completely unintentionally, and it all started with an article in the Stars and Stripes in 2001. And a guy by the name of Donald J. Maxwell saw this in Stars and Stripes, and he then got onto the operator of the Air Force base in Germany where he was stationed and said, "Get me the post office in Rabness in England, please." So he did, and he rang the post office, and the postmistress, Linda, was asked, "Do you know anything about a B-17 that crashed in the River Stour?" "I don't know anything, but I know a man who does, and that's me." He then rang me a few days later and said, "I'm coming to England." I then picked him up at Colchester Station. We then drove over to Tower A, and this aircraft is a B-17G. Its number's 43/37516. It was a matte black special ops aircraft from Cheddington, which is somewhere near Luton. Now, the wreck was found in 1997 by Sean Riley, who's a diver. And when it came down, it was shot down by friendly fire from Harwich, because there were a couple of German aircraft stooging around. And unfortunately, they hit the B-17 straight away, not realising it was a B-17. This was a 2115, obviously at night. It's a black aircraft, and it was hit at 12,000 feet, somewhere near the waist guns, Bombay. It severed a lot of control cables. It injured the bombardier, Lieutenant Connie Morton, in the eyes and the right leg. And they then shot down to 8,000 feet in trouble, where they was hit again, and then the tail gunner got wounded. The last man out was Captain Paul Stonerock. He bailed at 5,000 feet. The two pilots were still in it, and the pilots were Lieutenant Colonel Earl Aber. He was on his 51st mission, and the co-pilot was Lieutenant Maurice Harper, and he'd done a full set of missions on Spitfires with the Royal Canadian Air Force, and this was his first flight in the B-17. Now, the chap that should have been the co-pilot that night was Major General retired Walter Longenecker. He came over with the family of Aber and Harper when the aircraft was recovered. The recovery work was the 9th of June 2000. They put a barge out at low water mark off of Rabness. The first attempts at clearing the mud with giant vacuum hoses didn't work because it was being clogged with the clay from the river. So then they put a big digger with, I think it was something like an 18-foot arm on the barge. Sean Riley stayed on the barge for the 6 weeks it was in the river to recover the wreck. And when they found the remains of Harper and Aber, they were still clutching their parachutes. And then all the bones went to Hawaii. They were all identified with DNA. So Earl Aber was still missing, apparently, the skull and the rib cage. And when they opened up the grave again at Madingley, the skull and the rib cage apparently got into the grave of Earl Aber. So he's had at least 2 funerals, and Maurice Harper's bones went back to, I think it was somewhere in Missouri, for his full funeral, and the little bits and pieces that they couldn't identify were in a communal grave at Arlington in Washington. And since then I've found out that Earl Aber actually led the invasion on the 6th of June 1944, and unfortunately shot down by friendly fire. Right, this is the wreckage of the B-17 Tondaleo. In that corner there is a part of one of the 3.7-inch shells that actually hit the bomber. There were a lot more, but that's the only one we've got. And we found that wedged in the part of this wreckage when we cleaned all the mud and gunge off of it. And we got this wreckage because this is the chap that should have been the co-pilot, Major General Walter Longenecker. These are the two sisters of Earl Aber and Morris Harper. And they wrote a letter, so when all this went to Wheeler's in Colchester, we were given the freedom to probe the wreckage and recover everything that is here. The other bits and pieces, again we got those. That's one of the flying boots from one of the pilots, and other little bits and pieces all came because they wrote the letter to Mr. Wheeler at the scrapyard. That's a piece of the armour plating from the ball turret. That is a piece of the bomb rack, and there's a photograph there where you can see the numbers on the bomb rack, and they're the hooks that the bombs would have been on. But they were a leaflet dropping. Most of their service life was dropping leaflets in over-occupied Europe. The police station report from Harwich, 7th of March. I beg to report that about 21:10 hours on Sunday, 4th of March, an American Flying Fortress crashed in the River Stour about 3/4 of a mile from the Essex shore at Ramsey. The plane at once caught fire and was destroyed. There were a crew of 11, 9 of whom bailed out just before the crash, but the remaining 2, pilot and co-pilot on this it's presumed they were in the plane when it crashed and were killed. But it was decided that they couldn't do much because it was too deep and they hadn't got the equipment at that point to do it. So they stayed in there until 2000 when the Americans come over, and I think it cost them something like $400,000 to run this operation, which to me is fantastic. And the fact that we got the wreckage we did because of the letter from the family and the guy that should have been the co-pilot, Walter, that's just amazing. And as Don Maxwell said at the museum, what we do to remember these guys is amazing, and I think he's right.